Hello and welcome. Today I want to do a short video about the difference between oil paints and acrylic paints. I'll mention watercolours as well at the end. What is the difference between them? I think people can be very confused about it. I used oil paints all my life. I went to art college in the 1980s. I was using oils even before then. Everybody was using oil paints in the art college. I don't know anybody who wasn't. But now, especially over the last few months, I have gone more and more into using acrylics, and I'm finding that I love them, and my work is developing and I'm getting a lot more very, very interesting techniques. That's not to say I won't go back to painting with oils again, but I'm really enjoying acrylics. So I'm just going to get into that and discuss the advantages and the disadvantages of oils and acrylics in this video. As I said, when I went to the art college, I think everybody was using oil paints. They were considered to be the best, that they had the better pigment, but I think back then that maybe acrylics weren't the same quality as they are now, and it was a long time ago. It was in the 1980s. I think they've come on. There's a lot more pigment in them. They are better quality right now, and there's a lot of mediums developed that you can use with them to get more impasto or thicker effects with the acrylics. So, you know, whatever effect you're going for, you can probably do it nowadays, do everything with the acrylic paint. So eventually, maybe about 10 years ago or more, I began to, I knew other artists were using acrylics more, especially for the bottom layers of their paintings. I knew that they dried faster, they were cheap to buy, so I started buying them and using them for the under painting. So because they dry so fast, you could start your painting, you could get your painting well underway, the whole sketch of the painting in, the colours down, and then I would finish the painting and do the main body of work of painting with oil paints. And then a friend of mine asked me to do kind of a live art demonstration. It was in a group kind of setting with other artists, and we were all painting together, and it was live. So there was an audience there that were kind of coming in and looking at what we were doing. And I used acrylics for that because I knew it has to dry fast and people will want to purchase the paintings at the end. So it had to be something very immediate. So I used acrylics and I really enjoyed it. And I made something that was I made a few pieces. It was just in one evening that I actually painted a few pieces, and they were very vibrant, and people really liked them. And after that, I started experimenting more in acrylics. And then for some reason, I just drifted back to oils. And why did I drift back to oils? I think it's just completely tradition. It's what I did all my life. And if you think of all the artists out there, the traditional centuries of traditional painting, going into Picasso, abstract painting, the whole way, I would just call it all tradition. It all fits into tradition. They all used oil paint. So it's really hard to break away from, that sort of strength of tradition. But it's really, in recent months, I've turned more to acrylics, and I'll explain to you exactly why. What are the disadvantages of oil paints? They dry very, very slowly. That is the big disadvantage. Particularly the white paint is very, very slow drying. Recently, I was just trying to finish off some oil paintings, and I thought, look, I'll finish them off quickly. But then I added in some white paint. They really needed some white paint. And as I kept going, more white paint was added in. And I thought, look, I'll come back to it tomorrow. And it's too wet now to work on any longer. And that white paint it's really wet. I can't go over it. So it wasn't finished. And I went back the next day and the next day. I left it a weekend and I went back and it was still wet. So it's just really so slow. They can be so slow to dry. and I am not a fan of waiting. So a lot of the time what I would do is I'd just come back, try and finish a painting, and it would just get muddier and messier, and eventually I would scrape it off. And then you just end up with a complete mess. Then you pour on white spirits, wipe that off. Your cloths are absolutely filthy. You're using tissue paper, and the tissue paper is breaking off and sticking to the half-dried oil on the canvas. So now you've got a mixture of kitchen paper, just muddy oil, everything, and white spirits dripping down your canvas. And I absolutely destroyed some paintings. My fault, because I didn't have the patience. I mean, with all those years that I've used them, but it just simply is impatience. And I think that just at times it really, when I was developing work or changing my style or trying to do something new, it wasn't suiting me, and it kind of hemmed me into working the same way for many, many years. So yeah, it's very, very difficult. If you make a mistake, you just got to let the whole thing dry. The other thing is that there was times where, yeah, okay, it just doesn't work. I've let it dry, it doesn't work. I need to paint brand new painting over this. And when you paint a new painting over the old oil painting, and you put it against the light, you can actually see the old painting, the marks of the old painting under the new painting. So it really leaves, oil paints really leave this this mark, these shapes underneath. I've tried sanding, you go back then, try and sand them down, and that does help a lot. But look, yeah, they are, you need to know what you're doing. You need to be somebody who's got their mind made up, I think. Somebody who knows what they're doing when they start a painting, that they've got a plan and they've got a technique that's suited to oils, and then they can use oils. They understand what they're doing. Now, that's not to say I have some paintings, I will show you some paintings here in a minute that I did in oils that I really like, but it was it was hit and miss a lot of the time. One I would like, the next one I would paint wouldn't go right, and it would get muddy and it would be a mess. So I was producing a lot less work when I was working in oils. Okay, so the one thing about oils is the advantage of oils. A lot of people say the pigments in them are amazing, but I don't see the difference nowadays between acrylics and oils. I'm sure an oil painter would say different, that the quality of the oil, the actual oil, has a sheen in it, and mixed with the paint, it gives you that kind of luxurious kind of paint that's beautiful to work with. And the whole thing of the impasto, the paint raised off the canvas, that if you make a mark with a palette knife, a little flick, that will stay. So if you're painting waves on the sea, for example, and you make a flick of a wave that's raised out of the canvas, that will dry exactly the way you painted it. Whereas with acrylics, because they're emulsion based, that won't happen. It will flatten out and become flatter. Now, that's not to say that you can't create impasto effects with acrylics. You can use other mediums if you want to. And I'm sure people, I've never really experimented. It's kind of not my style to do heavy, thick painting. But if you're interested in that type of style, there are mediums that you can use to thicken it and get it to get impasto effects. Acrylics, what I love about acrylics is I like painting in layers. I make mistakes and I change my mind every second. So I paint one layer and then I paint over that layer, and you don't lose the layer underneath. It still comes through, and you can bring back parts of the underlayer if you want to. So that's a great richness when you're painting layer over layer over layer, and they dry so quickly. And even if they're not dry, you can just have a hairdryer down here on the floor, just catch the hairdryer, whiz it around, and that will dry something that's very wet on your canvas. So acrylics are great, just that idea that you could finish a painting in a few hours. You definitely get a painting done in a day. The larger ones will take longer, obviously, but smaller paintings you can work on very, very quickly and get them finished because it dries so quickly. Also, acrylics are fantastic for using stencils with, and other techniques like that. You know, you can use plastic, and you can use bubble wrap, and you can print things onto the painting and they will dry immediately. And if you make a mistake, you can just get your spray bottle of water, spray the mistake and wipe it off, you know, with your kitchen paper or a cloth. Just wipe it off and it's gone. So very, very clean. You're not messing around with white spirit. The other thing, just a little thing, was when you're using white spirit, you're using little jars like this, and I used to pour the white spirit into the very bottom, and I would only use that because the smell, and you don't want, you know, have loads of white spirit all over the place. And often my paint would forget what I was doing, the paint would get very, very muddy. The brushes wouldn't be cleaned properly because I'm only using a small little bit of white spirit. But, you know, when I'm using acrylics, and I see artists using buckets, you know, you can just leave your brushes soaking in a big bucket of water and things don't get as dirty because you've got a lot more. You can use a lot more. Your water is your mixer for diluting the paint, so that's very handy as well. Now, just talk about pigment in the paint. A lot of people who use watercolours, and this is a different, watercolours are used on paper, not on canvas. People who use watercolours, they love the pigment in them, and I think they're nearly entirely pigment. And there is fantastic, tremendous colour in them that you need to add a lot of water to dilute them. With acrylics, because there's a medium in it, there's emulsion in it, there's something to dilute, you know, to make it thick. So the pigment is mixed into this emulsion, some sort of plastic. So that dilutes the pigment down slightly. But the more money you pay for your acrylic paints, the more pigment you get. So obviously the more you pay out, the better quality paint you get. And you can use acrylics like watercolours. You can also use oils. I have a friend who uses oils like watercolours. He dilutes them down with white spirit and uses them in a very fluid way and gets beautiful effects, and uses them on canvas as well. So that is a lot of the quality of the paint. The more you pay for it, the better, the more pigment you get. So if you've used acrylics in the past and you've thought, I don't like them because there isn't as much pigment in them, it's probably because you're not going for the top quality acrylic paint. Now, in saying that, I have bought really, really cheap acrylic paints that are very high in pigment, but it is hit and miss. I've bought some that were really low in pigment and they're terrible. You have to put loads and loads on to get the colour on the canvas, and they look streaky when they come straight out of the tube or the bottle. But there are others I have bought that were absolutely fantastic. And I've bought some really cheap synthetic acrylic colours that are like neon, and they were brilliant, and they just give it kind of another dimension to the painting. So I just find experimenting with acrylics is absolutely fantastic. I've just got loads of different effects from them. And I think when you're developing your work and you're changing your work, or you haven't worked for a while and you've gone back to it, they're really, really good just to get you started off. You can work quickly, and they're just very, very good, especially for beginners. I would really, really recommend acrylics for beginners until you're settled down and you know what you're doing. And then you might consider going on to using oil paints if you're going for those type of effects. I'm going to just give you some examples from my own work of just, maybe you won't see the difference. I'm going to flip the camera over because I find the selfie mode isn't giving me as good a picture. So this is an example of a painting I did in acrylics, and if you can see it, there's a lot of stencil work in here. These little small marks are all I got from stencils, but there's a lot of brush work in there as well. And I don't know, you can see that there is a thickness to that paint. It's not just completely flat. I don't know, you can see there the texture coming out. So there is a certain amount of impasto work you can do with acrylics, and I think the colours are very, very good. Now behind it, I'm going to show you an oil painting. Now I did this oil painting, excuse me, I'm wobbling. I did that oil painting a few months ago, maybe 2 or 3 months ago. And I think I've just got more, I think it's just flatter. My approach to it is not as lively as the approach I'm using right now with the acrylics, but that's probably because I've just moved on and I've been experimenting with different things in recent times. But the colours in this are very good. They're oil paints. And I don't know, just to bring up close, I don't know if you can see the difference. I think it's quite hard to tell the difference between the oils and the acrylics. There's a nice luminosity to the oils. And just to compare colours, I'm just showing you this one here is in acrylics. And you can see you can just get very good colours as well from that acrylic paint. So yeah, just showing you those to give you, I'm kind of showing you similar colours just to give you, you know, the pinks and the reds. But this is kind of the different techniques and styles you can get that I've been getting from experimenting with acrylic. The other thing about acrylic, you can use things like, you can use mixed media. You can use like these little Conte crayons, and just this one here, they're water-based. You can use pencils, you can add all that in on top of the acrylic, whereas with the oil it's harder to use mixed media. It may not stay on the oil, it may come off, whereas with acrylics you can work with pencils and mixed media, all sorts of chalks and anything. It's just easier to use mixed media on the oil. So it just is, it's very, very versatile and gives you a lot more effect. So I hope I haven't run down oil painting. As I said, I used it most of my life, and I really love oil paints. They are really, really beautiful and thick and creamy and luxurious to work with. And as I said, I probably will go back to them. It's just right at the moment I'm having a love affair with acrylic paints, and they're doing what I want them to do, and I'm just finding new ways of working. And you know, I suppose what I would encourage people to do is, if you're stuck in using one medium, let's say you're stuck with watercolour or you're stuck even in acrylic, try something new. You know, it really is good. It'll help you develop your style. Start working in, the great thing about acrylics as well is you can work in a journal, you can work on paper, so you don't have to be so precious about it. You don't always have to work on canvas, whereas with the oils they will seep through the paper, unless you can prime the paper and they won't seep through, but there's just a little bit more work to it. But yeah, with acrylics you can just get out a sketchbook and paint away, and you don't have to worry about the paints going through the paper. They'll just sit on top of it very nicely. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If anybody disagrees with me or has something else to say, please comment and let me know what you think. And until next time, enjoy your painting, keep experimenting, try new techniques and try new mediums, and God bless, and see you soon. Bye-bye.